I'm going to do just a quick introduction. Today is February the 18th. We are recording from the East Bay. We have honored guest Jen Orr, who is quite an accomplished ultra cyclist, joining the Grizzly Peak Cyclists this evening. Really honored to have her presence today, given a long list of cycling accomplishments. Very excited about her joining us, and thank you, Jen. The format for this evening is consistent with the ones we've had in the past. So Jen will present for about 40 or 45 minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions. If you have questions along the way, please use the chat box, which is at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Drop in a question, and I'll monitor the questions, inbound questions. If it's a clarification question, I'll interrupt, I'll find a pause and ask Jen, the question, and otherwise we'll pull them up and we'll take the questions at the end. So without further ado, Jen, please tell us about yourself.
All right, thank you. Thank you for having me at the meeting here. I'm kind of new to sharing the screen, so hopefully I can get through the technical stuff, but yeah, I'm Jen Orr, and I'm an UltraCyclist, which if you're unfamiliar with that kind of niche area of cycling, it's depending on the definition, most people define ultracycling as ultra distances is anything more than, say, a century. There's a lot of double centuries out there that are organized rides. There's the randonneering, the brevets, which are more like self-supported bike packing type events. You have long distance, 12-hour, 24-hour time trial events. And then some of the multi-day events, such as the more, kind of notable ones being Race Across America, Race Across the West. There's some, it's becoming popular all over the world now with races in Europe, and there's even some taking off in India now. And then, in different types of events, again, it could be self-supported or with a support crew. So I kind of fell into this world about 4 years ago, which I guess I'll go into how that all happened in a little bit here. And over the course of those few years, turned out I realized it was something I was pretty good at, just going longer distances and kind of out pacing my competition, and ended up with some pretty notable results over the last few years that I'll talk about. So kind of a brief history. If I can get to the next slide. There we go. So when I'm a physical therapist. In 2006, I graduated from PT school. So we're talking about 15 years ago. I was pretty out of shape at the time. I'd been more active when I was younger, playing soccer. I'd never really been into more the endurance sports like running or cycling, but after kind of getting my career in order, I decided, well, I need to time to focus on my health, and started doing more exercising more regularly, and eventually discovered or found that I enjoyed kind of the endurance sports. I started kind of with running. Thought it'd be fun to do a half marathon, and then over the next few years that led to triathlon and discovering cycling. Worked my way up to my first Ironman in 2013, and have since finished 7 Ironmans, the last one being in 2018. And in about 2016, so about 4 or 5 years ago, I was training for one of my, it would have been my 5th Ironman in just a few years, and was just realizing I was getting kind of burned out on training for 3 sports, all of them kind of longer distances. I really did not, I got into the point where I really wasn't enjoying running anymore. But I did really enjoy cycling. I would get sick of, friends who are just cyclists, saying, "Oh, we're going to go for a big ride on Sunday," and well, I can't. I have to run that day. So I kind of do remember I had not, I was still in the middle of training for, it was Ironman Boulder at the time. I kind of remember a couple of distinct moments when I was thinking, I'm done after this. I'm just going to focus on cycling after this. I don't need to do the running and swimming thing anymore. So, and then in 2017, after Ironman Boulder, I kind of did stay true to that. I just focused on cycling in 2017, and I think that's the next slide actually. And it started out the year just my main goal was actually to do the death ride in Markleeville. And I was just, spent the first half of the year just doing a bunch of epic climbing rides to get ready for that. And it was just mostly just cycling for fun, having, going out and doing big rides with friends. And later in the year, on, with just maybe a month or two notice, I found out about this 24-hour time trial event they had out in Borrego Springs. Should note, I also had been doing some double century rides starting in 2016. So it wasn't unheard of for me to do, rides of longer than a century. And so they had this time trial that was put on by the same organization that puts on Race Across America. And, it was, there was the 6 hour, 12 hour, and 24 hour events. And, double century is approximately 12 hours. So I was like, I already know I can stay on a bike for 12 hours. Let me see if, if I'm going to do it, I've got to do the 24 hour because that's going to be something that I'll actually push myself. And I hadn't been on, you can see my time trial bike that I'm on in the picture here. I had spent most of the year, sitting on my road bike, doing a bunch of climbing. So I had not been on my time trial bike much at all since the last triathlon I did, over a year before that. Although I'd been putting in the miles, it was not on that bike, but it's a time trial. So I pull out that bike, I start, with a few weeks or so to get ready for it. I don't even think I realized that I needed a crew until maybe a month before, but I was able to get 4 friends together to come out and crew for me. And then at some point in the process, someone mentioned to me that, oh, if you do 400 miles in 24 hours, you'll qualify for Race Across America. And at that time, it was, I knew about Race Across America. I had read a little bit about it. I really had no desire to do it, but I just thought it would be fun to say I'd qualified for it. So I set my goal to do 400 miles, a nice even number in 24 hours. And mainly just because of the fact that, I went out just great. And, I think I was holding a, way faster pace than I needed to hit the 400 miles for probably the first half of the day. And then, but it only took about 5-6 hours before I was just really uncomfortable on that bike. And fortunately, I did bring my road bike. And so we were switching out every 4, 5, 6 laps, putting me on the road bike just so I could be a little more comfortable. But, I definitely had not, put in the time I needed on that bike. And just, after the fatigue really set in the last half, I was just in unknown territory. But I did manage to put in 392.8 miles and found out later on, or just after the race, that the qualifying standard for females was actually 375 miles. So I actually had qualified for solo ram Race Across America. So it wasn't my initial thought that, hey, this is what I want to do. But within a few months, I think enough friends had kind of encouraged me enough that I, it set, put the little seed out there, and, decided I would start thinking about it and start maybe planning for it. And set my sights on RAM. So Race Across America, which if you aren't familiar with it, it is a race from Oceanside, California to Annapolis, Maryland, and it covers a little over 3,000 miles. Goes over all terrain, the Rockies and the flats in the middle, central US, and then up out through the Appalachians in West Virginia. And you deal with, it's in June every year, so you deal with all the heat in the desert, the kind of storms in the Midwest. And you can do it either solo. You do have to qualify to do it solo. They also have teams, 2-person, 4-person, or 8-person teams. So in order to prepare myself, I decided in 2018 to crew for Shauna Hogan, who has done RAM many times. She still holds the under 50 open record for females, which she set back in the 90s, and she's now back competing in RAM at, I believe she'll be in, she's now in the over 60 age category and still competing in RAM, at least when it hopefully eventually comes back in the next year or two. It was canceled last year due to the pandemic, just like everything else. But so I was able to crew for Shauna and picked up a lot of tips from her, and that kind of helped me start getting some, organization together to start putting my own, helping to get my own crew together and support, and gave me a lot of ideas for how to go about doing RAM. I had also committed before all of this to doing one more Ironman in 2018 at Wisconsin, which was in September, and went back to Borrego Springs for another shot at that time trial for the 24 hours, and actually ended up winning the whole thing. So I actually beat, you can see Shauna, I'm on the top of the podium. Shauna's on the third step, and I actually ended up breaking her course record of 433 miles in 24 hours, and I ended up with 456 miles, so bettering my results from the year before by almost 60 miles, or maybe over 60 miles. So still on the same bike. And the person to my right, Megan Hakkinen, we ended up, I guess I was in the lead after, I think about 12 hours in, somewhere around that. And with just a few hours left, so my crew was starting to tell me that this person that had come out of nowhere, that they weren't even paying attention to, was gaining on me, and just kept eating into my lead until literally the last minute. We ended up with the same miles with about 3.5 minutes between us, between when we finished. So we finished with the same mileage, but because I had finished 3.5 minutes before she did, I ended up winning and having the course record. So the plan after that was to do Race Across the West, which is basically the first third of the RAM course. So it goes from Oceanside to Durango, Colorado. So the win at the World Time Trial Championships in 2018 was kind of a nice springboard. It put my name out there and created some hype, so that when I went to do Raw, a lot of people already knew who I was, and so trained through the first half of the year in 2019 for Race Across the West, and started in Oceanside. I had this great crew of 6 people, and found out around the area of Flagstaff that I was actually in the overall lead, not just of the women, but the men as well. And the second place guy, Andres, was we kind of been leapfrogging each other for quite a while. And so we leapfrogged each other a couple more times until I just kind of surged ahead and through that last night and early morning, and got to Durango several hours ahead of him and ended up winning the entire race. And so that the intention of doing raw is kind of supposed to be my build up. That was the longest race I would have done at that point that I've done at all. Is kind of my build up to, okay, just be prepared for RAM, which I had planned to do in 2020. So we all know what happened last year, and RAM got canceled, and as well as a lot of other things. So I started focusing once RAM was canceled. I started focusing on the Borrego Springs time trial. Megan, who had been second place to me in 2018, had come back in 2019 and broken that record again. So and ended up with, I think, an extra 5 miles. So it's now at 400 and I think it's 460.8 miles or something like that. So so I wanted to go back and have another shot at that record. I was, in really good shape, and with a month or so to go before the event, they canceled it again. It also got canceled because of the pandemic. So I had kind of built this backup plan of going for a 24-hour world record with the World UltraCycling Association, which a lot of people actually ended up doing last year because of races being canceled. Some of a lot of UltraCyclists, wanting to do something for their sponsors, and or just wanting to be able to do something with all these races being canceled, ended up going for some of these world records. So it's actually a really complicated process. With you don't just go out and ride and end up with a world record. You have to apply. You have to have a course, at least for the timed and distance records. You have to have a course surveyed. I think for the road records, the timed records, and the distance records, it has to be a course. I think it's like 5 miles, as little as 5 miles, and as many as 40 miles. So I was kind of racking my brain trying to think of the ideal course to use, and I kept going back to the course in Borrego Springs, which is an 18-mile loop. The only problem is that it does have a little bit of elevation gain around the back half of it. So I actually got the idea to cut that course in half and just kind of do the north 10 miles of it, which had a lot less elevation. So I had to, in order to use that course, it had to be surveyed and approved by the World UltraCycling Association, WCA, which wasn't a too hard of a process. I just had to go out and ride the course a few times and send in the data to the Larry Osland, who is kind of in charge of the world records. And so he was able to take the data to survey it and kind of approve it and say it's exactly this distance, which was like 10.03 miles or something like that. So the course had to be approved, I think, minimum of 4 weeks before the event. You have to set the date you have about I think the date has to be approved 4 weeks before. Then you have to fill out all this paperwork with all of your support crew. You have to have officials who are certified through WCA, which is not too horrible of a process. I think you just have to sign some paperwork and take kind of a paper test to show that they've read the rules. So the actual process of officiating, I don't even understand. But my friend Mark, who I have a picture of in there later, he kind of, I'm talking with him about doing the record, and he's done so much investigating, he had never officiated before, but seemed to have the process down. So I just said, hey, do you want to be the official then? And he kind of took that on, and him and I had two other guys that decided to that were officiating. So there has to be an official at the start finish of the loop, as well as one in a follow vehicle that has their eyes on me the entire time I'm riding. So which means I have to have a follow vehicle that is that has to be within line of sight for the entire 24 hours. So, so there's a lot of logistics that go into it. And so this picture here is actually, so it's one of my officials. No, actually, it's just two of my crew members, Eric and Pat. They're out there the day before the ride, just sweeping the course. This is one of the corners that had a bunch of rocks and gravel on it, and they were just making sure that it was nice and clean, and actually went out throughout the ride to make sure that it was swept clean. So I had a huge crew. I had something like 20 people. Just as soon as I announced that I wanted to do this record, I had all kinds of people, volunteering to help out, and it was great. Had, people manning with a one stop sign on the course to help me, to just let me know if there was traffic coming so I could roll through. We had to have permission from the local law enforcement to do that, but they said it was fine as long as we had someone they couldn't stop traffic, but they just had to let me know that it was safe to go through. So the date I had set for the 24-hour record was to start on November 7th at 9 a.m., finishing November 8th. And as I mentioned, the date has to be set 4 weeks in advance, and you are committed to that date. You can do it you can decide to do it 24 hours earlier or 24 hours later, a day earlier, a day later, if weather conditions look like that might be more favorable. And unfortunately, as we got closer to the date, the weather forecast started getting really ugly for the date of the event. Rain, thunderstorms, just crazy wind. That was, I'm trying to remember, I had the numbers like 50 mile per hour, winds and crazy wind gusts. And which is the wind is not unheard of for Borrego Springs, but like all the rain and storms was definitely something that they're not used to having there. So a lot of people ask me, well, couldn't you change the date or the course? Like, no, we have to, all of this is set beforehand. If anything, I could have started it a day earlier or a day later. I don't know that would have made a difference because the weather was just pretty ugly throughout that weekend. And even if I could have, I had this huge crew that was committed to that date. They all had jobs. They had to be back at work on Monday. They had to be at work on Friday. So I was kind of stuck with the date I had chosen. So next picture. So here's a couple crew members getting my bikes ready. So you can see the same time trial bike on the right there. On the left is my Cannondale System 6. It's my road bike, but it is very aerodynamic, and with the aero bars, I after riding both of them, I was actually tracking the data on both of them for a while, trying to figure out which one of them was faster. And it just kind of came down to, I felt more comfortable on the TT bike, and so that's the one I decided to go with. But I did have that Cannondale ready as a backup bike, and it did end up getting used for one lap or so for about an hour when I got a flat in the middle of the night. But I wanted to stay on that time trial bike for the entire ride, and I could definitely tell that I made the right choice when I got onto the other bike and did not feel as comfortable and couldn't wait to get back on the TT bike. So another couple pictures. You can see here's on the left is I got my driver and in the driver's seat, and then I've got my official in the passenger seat. So they pretty much had to stay behind me almost the entire ride. The only time they went ahead of me a little bit was there was a turn that was kind of a chicane. It was a right followed by a very quick left. And they would just kind of go ahead and look out for traffic and let me know it was clear to kind of roll right through that intersection and then get right behind me again. And then we would switch out the crew in the vehicle. There's also someone in the back seat who obviously took this picture, who was kind of getting water bottles, nutrition ready for me. And then the start and finish point was at Christmas Circle in Borrego Springs. And that was kind of where we had this kind of command station set up. And, because of the cold and the rain and stuff, I was having to do the occasional wardrobe changes, putting on jackets and vests and sleeves and whatnot. So they did a great job of, when we'd kind of just talk in advance. You can see actually on the center on the dashboard there, there's a communication system set up, so that they were able to talk to me while I was on the bike, and I could talk to them. So we would, determine as we were approaching Christmas Circle, do I need to, do we need to stop? Do I need anything? There was some restrooms there. Do I need to, do I need to put some warmer clothes on? They would radio ahead to everyone at the Christmas Circle, the crew there, who would have everything ready for me. If I, had to stop, I would have, you can see the crews just kind of all around me, just, someone's putting a sleeve on my left, someone's putting a sleeve on my right. They're zipping up my jacket and, trying to minimize how long I'm stopped there and I never even have to get off the bike. So they had it down to a science. We're running like a well-oiled machine. So it's pretty cool. And then even at night, this was actually when I had to switch. I was switching from, so I'd gotten a flat on the time trial bike. We pulled, they were ready for it. They pulled the backup bike off the car, switched out the lights, the Garmin, dropped off the time trial bike at Christmas Circle the next time we went through. The crew there got the flat fixed. Next time I came around, we switched the bike. We went through the process again, and just did it. And it was like a pit crew. I had friends that were out there watching and just said, yeah, they were like a NASCAR pit crew, getting it all, dialed in, and get me on the switching bikes within seconds. And then just this picture on the right there is just early in the morning. You can see him kind of both at night and the morning, pretty bundled up. I think it had gotten as low as like low 40s, 40 degrees. And with it all being all wet, for a lot of the night, the streets had dried up by that time, but we got quite a bit of rain, which made the roads pretty, slippery and got me all wet and cold. So with the weather conditions being how they were, the record that I was going for was 400, for 24 hours was 439 miles. So, as I mentioned, I had already done 456 miles in 24 hours. So I knew I was capable of doing that many miles. I had been training on that same loop in Borrego Springs. In the month or so before the ride, I had spent almost all of my weekends out in Borrego Springs, just doing that loop over and over. I was averaging 20 to 21 miles per hour for hours at a time doing that loop. So it was certainly something I should have been capable of, but with the conditions, the winds and the rain and the wet roads, it's going into it, I'm thinking, well, I'm definitely not going to be able to maintain those same speeds I was doing in training, but I think the speed I needed for the record was like 18 and a half miles per hour. And so I'm like, I'm not going to go out and look at, obsess over my speed. I use power when I'm training. So I know what power I should be able to maintain, and just going to focus on that effort and, see what happens. So I know that for the first 6 to 12 hours, I was right on, target with my numbers, keeping my, power right at my target, and heart rate was, staying kind of in a reasonable range. As we got into the night, it started getting colder. The winds were dying down. So technically the conditions should have been, more favorable for me, but at the same time, I was getting cold and I was slowing down. Fatigue was setting in. I felt like I could still hold the power. I was also struggling a little bit with nutrition. My stomach was getting upset. Um, and with about 6 hours to go, I knew I was far enough off pace for the record um, that it wasn't going to happen. But we decided to continue and get in the 24-hour ride that I had planned to do. And I ended up with, I think, 411 miles in that 24 hours. So, what else do I have as far as pictures here? Oh, and so here I am at the finish at 9 a.m. Sunday morning. My official mark had brought that flag and handed it to me, and I'm actually pretty cold. I had taken off the extra layers just around the corner before I finished because I wanted to have my kid on and for the pictures of the finish. And it just so happens that the rainbow came out just as I was finishing, so we got that cool picture at the finish over the mountains. And then so yeah, Mark's in the picture on the left. That's Mark, my head official. He's actually going to be doing a 24-hour record on his recumbent trike a week from Saturday on the same loop in Borrego Springs. So I'll be out there at least for part of it, cheering him on. And then on the right is my crew chief, Curtis, who kind of helped keep the crew all organized. And on the left there is me with my coach, Rachel, who I've been working with for the last 3 years, and who kind of put all the training programs together for all of those races that I was able to have good results in, the time trials and race across the West. And then on the right is about half of my crew. Some of them were getting breakfast ready for everyone. Some of them had gone and got some sleep, but yeah, that was maybe about half of my crew. So, so I did not break that 24-hour record, but I was able to, fortunately, we applied and Mark, my official, was able to do all this recording to make sure that I got credit for about 8 intermediate distance and time records. So you can kind of see, I don't know all the exact numbers. You can find them on the WCA website, but ended up with a 100-kilometer and 100-mile for my age group, 18 to 49, and then the 6-hour, 200-kilometer, 300-kilometer, 200-mile, 300-mile, and 500-kilometer solo female overall records. So that was the 24-hour ride. And so just kind of going to, what are the kind of keys if you're thinking about getting into ultra cycling, and what are the things that differentiate it from regular cycling, and and some of them just apply to generally cycling as well, but when you get to those longer distances, you definitely have to pay more attention to a lot of the details, the training, the nutrition, becomes a lot, the mental aspect becomes a lot bigger. A lot of us can get through 50-mile ride, century ride, you can screw up your nutrition and still get through it. But if you're looking to ride across the country, or ride for even for 24 hours, if you don't have your nutrition dialed in, it can definitely, or any of these things can definitely end up derailing your race. So as far as training, like I said, I do have a coach, and it can definitely be a delicate balance with the longer distances. You definitely have to put in a lot of distance, a lot of time, but at the same time, you have to be careful that you're not going into overtraining, especially if, like me, you have a full-time job to do in addition to, sometimes upwards of 20 hours a week of training. You have to be, I try to be specific with my training as far as what I'm training for. As I mentioned, with the time trial or the world record, um, I was because I was able to just train on the course itself. I was out in Borrego a lot, just Borrego Springs, just doing that same exact loop, so that I knew every pothole and every crack on that road by the time I did the record. I would also go out to there's a bike trail out here in Orange County, the Santa Ana River Trail. And there's about a 22-mile section of it. It's from Yorba Linda out to the coast. It's pretty flat other than just kind of going under the overpasses and stuff. And I would go out there and just go back and forth for hours, sometimes on the weekends. There's a 4-mile really flat loop around Fiesta Island in San Diego. So just for some variety, I would sometimes do those, or if I didn't want to drive, it's about an hour and a half from where I live to Borrego Springs. So if I didn't want to drive as far, I would stay closer to home. But I'd just basically do laps and out and backs over and over and over again, which is also kind of ties into the mental training. It can get definitely difficult to do that 10-mile loop over and over and over again for 24 hours. And you have to kind of be prepared for that kind of monotony. Whereas, if you're doing a big race, like for Race Across the West, I was, out doing epic climbing rides. I did an Everesting, or doing hill repeats until I reached the height of Mount Everest at 29,029 feet, which I think it's actually a little higher now, they say. But I was out doing a lot more climbing, but also some flat rides as well, just varied terrain. So yeah, just longer. You kind of need longer distances. Some people are able to tolerate longer distances than others. Again, for nutrition, that can play a huge role both on the bike and off the bike. You cannot out train a bad diet, so you have to be have a pretty not perfect nutrition off the bike, but have a pretty balanced diet. And I'm not the person to ask quite as much about nutrition because I still haven't figured out exactly what works for me. But I think for the longer distances, everyone has kind of a different thing. I've talked, I've heard of RAM racers, UltraCyclists who just like to eat a lot of real food, and sandwiches and fig bars, Cliff bars, whatever, gels. Others stick purely to like a liquid nutrition, like kind of endurance fuels like Spiz or UCAN or Hammer, Infinite, or some of the more popular ones. I have a coach who my coach Rachel has a background in sports psychology, so she's big on kind of the mental preparation aspect of it and using visualization. You sometimes even use Headspace, the app for meditation, pretty frequently, just to kind of clear my head and have my head kind of in the right place, which you kind of have to work on both during training, and then it also helps to leading into the race to kind of work on like imagery and visualization. And then you just have to have a solid support crew, and that can many a RAM Race Across America racer has fallen apart because of just not having a crew that could hold things together. So putting together a good crew can definitely make or break you. You just have to have a combination of people who who are able to get along, that there's not going to be any drama, people that are fairly low maintenance, that are dependable, people that aren't going to get on your nerves when you're really tired and fatigued, or when they're really tired and fatigued, or when everyone is tired and fatigued. And just you want to have you do want to have maybe some people that you're really comfortable with, that are really close to you, that are going to know, be able to look at you and know what you need or know what you want. But you also want to have some people that are maybe kind of more neutral acquaintances, who will have kind of more of a rational way of looking at things, because they're not as emotionally invested in what you're doing. They are invested in it, but they're you're going to look at things a little more rationally. So um, those are kind of, I guess, in a nutshell, some things to, I'd say the keys to success. So if you're looking to follow me on social media or the web, these are my social media contacts. So on Facebook, I have a fan page, the General Ultra Endurance Cyclist. I have an Instagram page. I'm on Strava as Genor. And I have a website blog, genor.blog. So I am currently, I was hoping to do RAM this year. And in the last month or so, between not being sure, it does sound like they may have some version of RAM happening this year, the way they're talking about it. But because it's just been so uncertain, it's been difficult to prepare, and I've been trying to deal with some other health issues. So I'm kind of taking a bit of a step back right now and still doing a little bit of training, but hoping to start building back up the training again later this year and be ready for RAM in 2022 in June. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. So you won't see me doing a lot of exciting stuff for a little while, but I definitely plan to be back. If you're looking for a great coach, if you are looking, it's always good to have someone who's got a background in the type of cycling that you're doing. My coach Rachel, her website is tenaciousendurance.com. She's a great coach for just cycling in general. As far as I know, I'm the only ultra cyclist she's working with, because I was, she actually started out, she coached me for my last Ironman, and ended up, I knew that she's very thorough with her, research, and asked her if she wanted to keep coaching me through the 24-hour time trial and through raw, and she kind of embraced that challenge, and obviously we've had some good results. So definitely look her up if she's in the Temecula Murrieta area down here, but she, a lot of her clients are all over the country, and she works online with them. She's good at communication and always available by text or phone. So she's pretty personable. And then my main sponsors right now are the bike shop Temecula Valley. If you're ever in the area, awesome bike shop. They've been working with me since I was getting ready for raw, and have helped keep my bikes in great shape for the last couple of years. And then the communication system I mentioned earlier is the Vertix Ultra. They have a great communication system. The system that was used by a lot of ultra cyclists until a couple of years ago was the Toronto. I tried using it during raw, and we had so many issues that after the first day, I wasn't even able to communicate with my crew. But this one I've done a few races with this system now, and it works perfectly. So if you're looking for a comm system, that's the one that I think most of us have switched to at this point, because it's working really well. So I guess with that, I can open it up to some questions.
Yeah. Jen, this has been just unbelievable. You've gotten a few compliments along the way in the chat box. I mean, people are, very much in awe of your abilities and persistence. Someone said determination, stamina, and grit. I have a couple questions myself, but one question that came in from Tom was, what nutrition do you intake for 24 hours? Maybe just dive in. You mentioned you somewhat share with us how you think about your nutrition.
Yeah. I usually end up needing for longer rides for double centuries and through the 24 hours, I was probably taking in close to 300 calories an hour. For that ride, I had been using mostly UCAN, which is a product that's kind of more of a starchy rather than sugary product. I'm still not sure that's exactly what's going to work for me. As I mentioned, I had some stomach issues, and um, not sure my gut's quite used to that yet. So it's usually a combination of that, something like that, with the occasional gel if I just kind of need a quick boost. I really don't go through too many energy gels, but I kind of usually have them on hand. Um, and then just the occasional, like I said, fig bars, even some like beef jerky if I need something salty, potatoes, potato chips. So a little bit of real food, but I feel like I do better. You can only digest so much for, when you're talking about, 24-hour race. Your gut can only process so much real
Mhm.
food, is, I think. So if you can find a nutrition, kind of more of a powder that you can mix in a bottle, and it's more in the liquid form, I feel like that's kind of an easier thing to digest over these longer distances.
And especially if there's heat involved or something.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a question that came up from Stephen Chen, and he asked, "How do you manage the lack of sleep?" And related, how did or why did you choose the 9 a.m. start
Mhm.
time?
Yeah. I actually, so the time trial, when they do that race, it usually starts they started at 5 p.m. And I kind of, it the first year I thought it was like, why would they start at 5 p.m.? That just seemed like a weird time. And I kind of now understand the reason for that is because they want us riding in the dark, while we're still relatively fresh. And then as the fatigue sets in, later in the race, it's now light outside, and hopefully, kind of our circadian rhythm, our natural, melatonin and stuff, where we actually feel awake, instead of like, at the end of the ride when our bodies are naturally tired. Now we're in the dark and potentially unsafe. The reason I chose 9 a.m. is because the year before, for the time trial, I felt having to, unless I had like jet lagged myself, which is kind of impossible and I have to work full time. It was just, I didn't like having to, wake up, would have had to wake up, say Friday or Saturday morning, and just sit around all day waiting to start this ride in the afternoon. I kind of wanted to start it at a time when I'm used to getting myself going. We weren't as concerned about my safety at night because I was going to have a vehicle behind me the entire time to kind of keep an eye on me. So I still stand by that decision. I think it was still the best time for me to start. Um, I I tend to, I've done fine for the most part with 24 hours without sleep. I mean, in this case, I don't even remember a time where I was, felt like I wanted to take a break and sleep during this race. I know that a couple of the 24-hour races I've done in the past, I usually tend to struggle around 4 to 6, just before it gets light out, I'll start to kind of feel sleepy. Um, I try not to do too much caffeine, but and because of that, actually, it kind of does help when I start to get to that point where I'm feeling a little sleepy early in the morning. Taking like a caffeine pill kind of gives me that jolt that I need to stay awake. So, like
Mhm.
during Raw, Race Across the West, I'm still trying to figure out what I'm going to do for my sleeping strategy for RAM. Usually racers will average around 2 to 4 hours of sleep per 24-hour period. So I'm, going to have to figure out the right balance and when's the best time to take the rest. For Raw, I slept a total of maybe 90 minutes I finished that race in 2 days and 20 hours. And I slept maybe an hour and a half of that.
Wow. It's so strong. Um, I had a question. What would you consider to be the common characteristics of successful ultra cyclists or athletes?
hmm I think most of us are pretty introverted. we're, we're, some people would even say that, I've heard it said that a lot of us probably, we've got a screw loose, or we've got some demons that, you know, we're running from or whatever. And maybe that's true for some of us and for others not. But yeah, just, you know, being able to just, especially with this, you know, I was going to say another thing with the training is probably at least 90 to 95% of my riding is totally solo. I have to just, you know, go it. It's, you know, it's just, and it's monotonous. You know, a lot of cyclists don't want to just, you know, ride this, you know, kind of fairly moderate paced all day long. They want to, you know, either race or, you know, go fast or do intervals. You know, it's, you know, so much of my riding is just, you know, going out and sticking to one pace. I do there are some intervals in there at times, but it's just, you know, long monotonous hours, usually solo, just kind of keeping an eye on the computer and making sure I'm sticking to a pace. So kind of being able to, almost like a yeah, just an ability, you know, to just kind of live in your own head for hours and hours at a time.
Mm-hmm. That's good. And what recommendations, my last question is, you know, what recommendations would you have for athletes who are considering, you know, getting into ultracycling?
I would say start with, you know, some of the, just kind of decide what types of distances you're wanting to do, and, you know, maybe enter one of these. They have some of these time trial events. Hopefully they'll have the time trial in Borrego Springs this year. They have a 6-hour, a 12-hour, and a 24-hour. So you could start with any of those if you didn't want to do the full 24 hours. Like I mentioned, they have these the California Triple Crown series of double centuries all over the state. They've got some great courses. I think some of those events they already have actually happened this year, and they're getting permits for them. So those should be happening, at least some of them this year. That's a great way to start if you've already been doing some centuries and you're just looking to do some longer distances. Just deciding, you know, are you looking to do more of a self-supported thing? Are you comfortable carrying all your own gear, you know, doing some of your own mechanical work? You know, can you just kind of do, like, there is a self-supported version of the Race Across America, the Trans Am race, which I think is even longer, but yeah, it's all self-supported, and, you know, you have to carry all your own stuff. And, you know, if you have, that's where I'm weak, is if I have a mechanical issue, I need to have a crew, because I'm not going to know how to fix it. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Hey, one question came in. You know, what is required, and how can people support your RAM effort in 2022?
Okay. Yeah, if you keep an eye on my my social media and website, as we get closer, we'll definitely be, you know, putting stuff out there as far as, you know, trying to do some fundraising. I've already, because I was supposed to do it last year, I had some money that I had been fundraising. I didn't raise enough money, but still have that put away. So yeah, if you can follow my social media sites, and even on my website, if you there's some information. Is, you know, I've had some a time station. There's 50 time stations or so set up across the country, and I've, you know, had people sponsoring those for, I think it was $150. So you know, if you wanted to, I still have plenty of those available for next year.
Great, good. So I think, unless there are other questions, I think I'll wrap. And I noticed there was someone here, Tom. Is Tom Frazier out there? If you want to, if that's you, you can take yourself off mute. I imagine you want to say hi to Jen, since you established our connection.
Hey, Jen, it's Tom Frazier. How are you?
Good. How are you, Tom?
I am wonderful. Thank you so very much for agreeing to share with us your incredible story. It's just, you're amazing. That's all I can say.
All right. Yeah, thanks for having me.
I'm in awe. I would probably be doing good to do a century, and then you start talking about 400 miles. I'm like, that's crazy.
Well, I think with that, we have our next presentation. I think it's on the 5th or the 4th of March. And that's Women on Wheels. I think it's an organization that's tracked over 240 women who've ridden solo around the world. So we'll have Loretto joining us. So very excited about that. So those still with us, stay tuned. And Jen, all the best. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for joining us. We really appreciate it. Much,
Thank you.
much luck. I'll follow you on Strava now.
All
Thanks
right.
again.
Thank you. All right.
All right. Have a good
Thank
evening, everyone. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Bye-bye.